Let's start by acknowledging this. It is a great day to be a Bronco. Can I get an amen? Welcome to Santa Clara Magazine Live in Silicon Valley, where it all began. I'm Stephen Saum, editor of Santa Clara Magazine, and it's my privilege here to introduce the evening to you. I've been at Santa Clara for a dozen years, and I have to say, one of the real privileges of editing the magazine is Santa Clara has such incredible stories to tell. We have some special guests here this evening. I'd like to make sure we recognize them here in the audience. We have University Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Dennis Jacobs. We have Vice President for University Relations, Jim Lyons, here this evening. Jim, all right. Vice President for Enrollment Management, Mike Sexton, right up here. And Dean of the Jesuit School of Theology, Dr. Kevin O'Brien, Father Kevin O'Brien, right? And Dean of the School of Engineering, Al Ortega, right, Dr. Ortega. So tonight continues a series of events for alumni, parents, and friends of Santa Clara University that we'll be hosting over the next few years in cities across America and internationally. Our primary purpose for hosting these events is to share the extraordinary innovation happening at Santa Clara University and to bring together the global Santa Clara community. We're also here to bring a piece of the award-winning magazine that I have the privilege of editing. Now, one of the neat recognitions that we recently received for the magazine was we were honored with an Ozzie Award by Folio Magazine in New York for the best designed university magazine in the country, which is pretty cool. The Aussies, I should say, those also attract competition from the likes of The Economist, Harvard Business Review, right? Some big dogs. We also won the award for best use of photography by an association or nonprofit organization, which is pretty cool. And we shared that award with Science Magazine, which is also something that we're happy to share with Science, right? This photograph, it honors the work of Father Tom Smolich, who's the head of the Jesuit Refugee Service. And this is showing some of the work that the Jesuit Refugee Service does. Father Smolich is a graduate of the Jesuit School of Theology. And I mention that because one of the important things that we do with the magazine is try to tell stories that capture the breadth and the depth and the complexity of all the people who make up the university. The magazine that I've been editing for the past 12 years has brought together some amazing voices, and we're going to hear a couple of them here this evening. We're going to hear from Dr. Shannon Vallor, who teaches in the Department of Philosophy, and Michael S. Malone, 1975 grad and 1977 MBA as well. One of the things that we do with the magazine is also try to offer new ways of understanding the world, illuminating stories in surprising ways. And one of the ways we want to do that here this evening with the magazine live is producing an edition of the magazine that captures the structure of the magazine as well. Right? So we've brought together for you Mission Matters, right, with University News, where Father O'Brien will be giving us an update with what's happening at Santa Clara today. We'll dive into the feature well with Mike Malone and Shannon Vallor, right, for the meaty discussions. And then we bring it back to you. You'll have the chance to ask your questions with the Bronco News, ask your questions of our speakers, and you see those white comment cards on your seats, right? During the talk or at the end of the talk, feel free to write down questions, and our staff will be collecting them. They also have pens that they'll be able to share with you, right? And it is Now, my privilege to introduce another star of Santa Clara University, Father Kevin O'Brien, who has served as the Dean of the Jesuit School of Theology since August 2016. He came to us after serving 8 years at Georgetown University, Executive Director of Campus Ministry, and then as Vice President for Mission and Ministry. Father O'Brien joined the Society of Jesus in 1966. In the course of his 10-year formation as a Jesuit, Father O'Brien earned a master's in philosophy from Fordham University, a Master of Divinity, and a licentiate in sacred theology from the Weston Jesuit School of Theology at Boston College. Father O'Brien taught theology at Georgetown, philosophy and ethics at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, and business law at Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York. He serves on the Board of Trustees at Marquette University. Please join me in welcoming Father Kevin O'Brien.
Thanks, Stephen, for aging me so much. I entered the Society of Jesus in 1996. There is some gray hair, though it does sometimes feel like 50 years, all depending on the day. Thanks, Stephen. And Stephen's very modest. What he has done with this magazine is truly exceptional. And I know you get to... And in a day where print is, we see fewer and fewer magazines in print, it's a treasure to get our magazine in our mailboxes. So, Stephen, thank you. Father Eng sends his regrets. He's not able to be here tonight. This is the weekend once a year where the presidents of the Catholic universities in the country gather in Washington. So Washington needs as much help as it can get. So Father Eng is there. So he's asked me just to offer a few updates about what's happening at the university. And I think what's most important to remember is, while we'll highlight some very important achievements and ways that you can help us, the work of the university goes on every day in classrooms and laboratories and in libraries. And a lot of that's not seen. Another semester has begun. And that's important news because that's where your support as alumni and our tuition dollars are put to use, where another generation of students are being formed in competence and compassion and conviction and courage to meet the needs of today's world. I'm the dean of the Jesuit School of Theology, which is the newest school at Santa Clara, affiliated with Santa Clara in 2009. Our campus is up in Berkeley, so we have a North Campus. Half of our students at the Jesuit School of Theology are Jesuits and other religious who are getting degrees to teach theology or become ordained. The other half, though, are laymen and women. And all of our graduates want to make the world a better place. They want to serve the church and the world by serving in parishes or schools or social agencies that work with the poor. They're everywhere and around the world. About 40% of our students come from outside the US. We're a graduate school, like the law school and the MBA program, for instance, our School of Education. But I just share my little piece of campus of the university to remind you of the impact that your support has on what we do every day. So thank you. I want to highlight a remarkable achievement that Santa Clara enjoys, which is exceptional among universities, much less the Catholic and Jesuit universities. In November or December, one of our graduates was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship, which is remarkable because there's only about 32 given or 33 a year. This is the third Rhodes Scholar that Santa Clara has produced in 8 years. So that's, or as Father Eng likes to say, it's the fourth Rhodes Scholar since 1851. One of the things that we do, and one of the reasons why our graduates excel in so many ways, both visible and not so visible, is how we try to bring together at Santa Clara technology and entrepreneurship, the arts and humanities, the sciences, together, and they're bound together by our Jesuit values and our Jesuit commitment. And that's what makes us distinctive. I think it's fitting. We're here at the Computer History Museum in the heart of Silicon Valley. But Silicon Valley has a soul. And Santa Clara, I think, is the soul of Silicon Valley. And I think it's important for us to remember that as people who love this place and who are alums, that Silicon Valley has a soul. And in one sense, I think we're it. Because we bring the best of academics, of engineering, of the arts and the sciences, and law and business, theology. But we wrap it in this long tradition, a 500-year-old tradition of Jesuit education. We're proud to, as was announced last year, we were proud to begin breaking ground this year on the Sobrato campus for discovery and innovation, which will tie together in a very interdisciplinary way the disciplines of the School of Engineering, the Natural Sciences, and the College of Arts and Sciences, and the Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship. So again, bringing together in one place in the heart of the present campus in San Jose or in Santa Clara, this amazing experiment in interdisciplinary work. And it will really set us apart, certainly among the landscape of higher education in the US. But we couple that too with other things that are going on. We've established over the last few years an arts district as part of our campus with this beautiful art facility and museum, and tying together in another professional campus, the business school, the programs of the business school and the law school. And then, of course, we have the North Campus up in Berkeley, where I come from. So all this is exciting, and it really reflects to us our deep commitment to the core of our mission at the university, which is our academic enterprise. But again, that core has surrounding it or supporting it or animating it our Jesuit values. And part of those values is this deep commitment that we put our education or our faith in service of others. A deep commitment to the common good, with particular attention to those who are poor and marginalized and most vulnerable in our society. That's why I say we have a certain soul here, that we can freely bring faith and reason, science and religion into dialogue with all the other intellectual activity of the university in a way that deepens and gives life to what we're doing there, in a way that small school in Palo Alto is not doing. Because we have something distinctive to offer, and that is that Jesuit tradition. And again, a relentless commitment to the common good, and that we try to form our students in a very intentional way to put their education in the service of others. And we don't expect them to do that merely simply after they graduate, but as they are students, by building up their social sensitivity to the needs of others in our community, and frankly, around the country and the world when our students do research in other countries or do service in this country or elsewhere. So that's something we really should be proud of, that we're trying to transform the world by transforming our students, one class, one paper, one research project at a time. So to give you a taste of what that transformation looks like, we want a feature for you now. A couple of our students and faculty who really incarnate, gives flesh to what I have shared with you. So we are delighted you're here, and God bless Santa Clara, and go Broncos. Thank you.
We tend to attract students that actually are interested in working to solve real problems. So Santa Clara is all about that, and the students are really eager to actually participate. So we provide them with opportunities to actually make an impact, a real one.
My name is JJ Galvin. I'm the project manager for the Tiny House team, and we're a group of students that are learning to use our engineering skills outside of the classroom by building an off-grid tiny house. We have electrical, mechanical, civil, all the different disciplines of engineering. We've all had to work together very closely and take into account things that we might not normally.
One of the really innovative aspects of this house concerns its solar array.
We've partnered with a solar tracking company that does solar tracking rings. Since our house is so small, we wouldn't be able to fit it just on the solar panels. So we decided to modify our trailer so that the entire thing rotates as the sun moves in the sky throughout the day.
Our research studies microbial evolution. Recently, we've used our knowledge to start a collaboration with the Alameda Public Health Labs. And in this collaboration, we're developing software that will use whole genome sequence information to both identify bacteria, but then also identify what mutations they might carry that confer antibiotic resistance.
It's not every day that an undergrad student gets to say, we have the potential to patent this, like this software, this incredible tool that can be applied directly, to patients, to hospitals, to communities. That's not the norm.
So as you can imagine, it's quite impractical and maybe even very expensive to use actual human patients to test for or discover new cancer therapeutics. How our lab is contributing to this a little differently is by trying to understand what parameters may affect cell responses to new drugs. Once we have optimized the final parameters that are necessary for these biomaterial scaffolds to mimic or predict human responses to new therapeutics, these parameters can then be deployed to various scientists and researchers around the world so they can come together and discover new therapeutics against cancer, which is one of the biggest challenges we face in the world today.
Right now, I feel that environmentalism has a very narrow narrative that is pretty exclusive to most of the people actually affected by environmental degradation. I was able to go to Uganda as a global social benefit fellow, and in that fellowship, I conducted action research with a social enterprise called BANA. So they're working within communities and educating women and men and community leaders, because if you don't have everyone working and you have 20% of the people making solutions for everyone else, they're not going to actually be long-term sustainable solutions, which is what we need in environmentalism.
We just finished the first year of a project looking at food and water security with small-scale farmers. After documenting these patterns of linking the presence of fruit trees on smallholder farms to shorter periods of seasonal hunger or better food security outcomes, we took this recommendation, we shared it with the cooperatives, we shared it with Community Agroecology Network, nonprofit organizations, we presented it back in these different formats. The environmental policy challenge really is how do we incentivize the green infrastructure, the social interactions, and the communication to create more sustainable cities.
It's an important trend right now. The society finally figured we can help. So let's, put our hands together and make sure that people have clean water. It's the 21st century, come on. The students sometimes when they first come, they don't even understand that that's a problem, that people actually don't have access to power or paved roads or sewage. But this is a way of showing them that they can actually use their engineering skills to do much more than that.
You watch that and you get inspired, you get energized, you get enthused, and that's what's happening on our campus right now. My name is Aldo Billingsley, and I'm a professor in the Department of Theater and Dance at Santa Clara University, and I have the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce Dr. Shannon Vallor. Dr. Vallor is the William J. Rewalk Professor in the Department of Philosophy at Santa Clara University and is a former president of the International Society for Philosophy and Technology. Dr. Vallor is a member of the steering committee of the Markula Center for Applied Ethics and serves on the leadership team of the nonprofit foundation for responsible robotics. Her work investigates social and ethical implications of rapid advances in robotics, investigates new social media, surveillance, and biomedical technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Shannon Vallor.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank Aldo, Father Kevin, Stephen and Santa Clara Magazine, and most of all of you for being here today to hear more about what we're doing at Santa Clara. And I'm honored to be chosen to talk to you a little bit about some of the work that I do. So my work explores the ethics of emerging technologies, but for the past few years, it's been the ethical implications of artificial intelligence that everyone from academics to industry to government and policymakers have been most interested in hearing about. And so it's the subject actually of my next book. My first book really looks at the kinds of moral frameworks that we bring to our interactions with technology. But there's an incredible demand today to hear more about artificial intelligence specifically, to hear more about what kind of future we can expect with it. So this presentation quickly explores some of the themes of that book. And I'm looking forward to a deeper discussion with you and with Mike Malone during the Q&A. So my talk is about the future of AI, what we can expect from it, and perhaps most of all, who is responsible for it. So what should we expect? Because depending on who you listen to, and some of you may have heard some of these extreme statements being made about AI, some people would have you believe that it's the solution to all human problems, while others would tell you that it's essentially doomsday on a chip. So part of my work seeks to kind of bring more reasonable, informed perspectives on artificial intelligence to industry, to policymakers, to academics, and to citizens generally who need to think about how to govern an ethical future with artificial intelligence. So let's start by asking this question: what is AI? Because there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. So in the field of artificial intelligence, we make a distinction between the kind of what we call narrow AI, or sometimes we say task-specific AI, that exists now and that will only get better in the coming decades. This is the kind of AI that many of you already interact with on a daily basis, often without realizing it. The kind of AI many of you are carrying in the phones in your pockets right now. That kind of AI is the kind that has exploded in sophistication and capacity over the past 5 to 10 years, and that we expect to get rapidly more powerful and sophisticated. The other kind of AI, though, what we call AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is a purely theoretical, at this point entirely fictional idea of a kind of machine intelligence that would be like ours. Right, the kind of human-level intelligence that could function just as a human mind does. That kind of AI, and I speak here not just from my own view, but from the view of the leading AI researchers who are trying to build the next generation of AI, that kind of AI is not coming anytime soon. And so some of the hype and the fears that we hear about AI are based upon a scenario that even the best AI researchers think is unrealistic. Okay, so then what is AI, right? Some of you here are old enough like me to be familiar with this guy, right? It's not like this. It's not a mind. It's not a consciousness embedded in silicon. Or maybe some of you, when you think of AI, think of something like this, a more recent fictional example from the movie Ex Machina. We don't need to be worried about sentient androids like those we encounter in science fiction, using their human-level intelligence or even greater intelligence to outsmart us and carry out their own secret agendas, right? That makes great movies. It doesn't make for great policy or thinking about the reality confronting us. But that's not to say there aren't a lot of risks and concerns about AI that we need to be acquainted with. So what is AI like? It's more like this. And this, and this. Let me explain these, what may seem like strange comparisons to you one by one, okay, and hopefully they'll make a little more sense. Let's go back to this one. One good way to think about the kind of AI that we have today, the kind of AI that we're going to see get increasingly powerful, is to think about it as machine-augmented cognition. Whose cognition is being augmented? Whose thoughts are being improved? Ours. So in certain activities, the kind that have well-defined goals and fixed rules, like chess and the game of Go, it's true that AI can already leave humans in the dust. That's already happened. And so if you generalize from those cases, you might think that pretty soon AIs will be able to beat us at everything and solve any kind of problem or win any kind of game without our help or participation. Now, it's true that repetitive and routine tasks in the workplace will increasingly become automated because a lot of these tasks are the sorts of tasks that narrow AI can get very, very good at very, very fast. But when it comes to genuinely understanding and solving problems in complex and unpredictable real-world settings, where there aren't a fixed, finite set of rules, where the goals aren't simple and clear, in those settings, which are most of the settings that we interact with, AI will not replicate human minds anytime soon. In those settings, AIs will instead be used more like prosthetics for our brains. They will amplify and extend what intelligent humans can accomplish, augmenting our performance in ways that we could never hope for on our own. AI will help us make new medical and scientific breakthroughs, enable more efficient designs and manufacturing processes, and help us fashion faster and smarter responses to complex threats, from pandemics to natural disasters. So there's a lot of good things that we can hope for from artificial intelligence, despite its risks. So let's talk about the kinds of AI that we're going to see more and more of. So we could talk about self-driving cars. This is an interesting example because self-driving cars are a hybrid of the two kinds of AI that I spoke of a moment ago, right? The kind of AI that is really good at playing games like chess and Go, and the kind of AI that sort of helps us deal with messy, complex problems. So driving is mostly a well-defined game with clear rules, right? Stay on the road, don't hit anything. So AI-driven cars can actually do a lot without our help because of this, and we'll continue to see a lot more of them. But driving also takes place in an unpredictable environment that machines don't actually understand. So there will still be some limits on what situations an automated car can handle, and that'll be true for a long time. We also will see more and more virtual assistants, like Alexa here, right? And Echo. These kinds of virtual assistants will continue to aid our daily performance using AI to gather information and carry out particular tasks under our direction. Even more influential, I think, are the kinds of decision support systems that are already operating in lots of systems in ways that are not visible to us. That we don't have a device that we're interacting with, but we might not realize how much these systems are doing behind the scenes. These kinds of systems are being used already in medical, legal, financial, and other settings to compile and analyze data that would quickly overwhelm a human mind. And these systems can promise to deliver those analyses to us in a way that enables faster and more informed judgments on our parts. So they can augment the performance of doctors. They can augment the performance of your financial advisor. But those humans will still be around for a while. We can also talk about social robots, right? Robots and AI are different things, but they often are combined together. So social robots that are powered by artificial intelligence will be more and more popular. They won't really be our friends or our loving caregivers because they don't love and they don't care. But they will fill in more and more of the gaps where our human friends, family, and caregivers are missing. And whether that's a good thing or a terrible thing is a question that we will need to start asking very soon. Finally, we're going to see an explosion of uses of artificial intelligence in military technology. Here you see an unmanned fighter jet, right? There's nobody home, nobody flying that thing, except a machine. This is a fighter jet developed by the Air Force to function in combat as what's called a loyal wingman. That's actually the name of the research project for human pilots. China, the United States, and other nations are investing heavily in AI to magnify and extend human military performance, lowering the cost of going to war and perhaps changing the balance of global powers. Okay. And these are just a few of the kinds of AI that we're going to see in our lives. There are 5 or 10 other examples I could have easily given you, and they will expand. So here's the other comparison that I think is helpful. AI is an accelerant. That is, it will fuel whatever social dynamics already exist, speeding them up and powering their spread on unprecedented scales. Think of the role today of automated online bots that were responsible for accelerating the spread of political conspiracies, fake news, and fueling divisive rhetoric in the US and the UK last year in ways that we're only now just beginning to understand. But remember, we already had political conspiracy theories before AI got here. We already had false stories. We already had divisive rhetoric. What AI did is pour gasoline on the fire. And we'll see that in a lot of other ways too. For example, if you think about the dynamics of rising economic inequality, there's a real risk that AI will function as fuel poured on that fire to amplify that dangerous trend. There's a lot of risks with AI, actually. Here's a long list. Scholars like myself have written papers on all of these topics and many more. Each of them is, in fact, now its own area of intense study by journalists, social scientists, technologists, and ethicists like me. But think about the fact that all of these are risks that existed in our society already, right? So were these risks created by intelligent machines? No. They're reflections of human social and ethical failures that were already here, but have the potential to be amplified and accelerated by the power of artificial intelligence. So AI makes these risks more urgent and more acute, more important for us to address quickly and wisely. And then finally, here's the third comparison. AI is a mirror. I don't know how many of you recognize this, right? This is from Chicago. This is the famous Bean mirror. So a lot of times we hear about AI as if we can expect it to be an alien mind. But the kind of AI that we have today and the kind that we're going to keep seeing is always a reflection of human-generated data and design principles. Every AI is a mirror of society, although often with strange distortions and magnifications that can surprise and disturb us. So this is why I think the bean is a great image, right? First of all, it doesn't just reflect one of us, it reflects a whole network of societies. And it reflects it in ways that are distorted, surprising, sometimes amusing, and sometimes hard to predict. And this is very much what we are seeing with AI. So look at these headlines. These are all headlines that have come out in the past year or two about AI. Note the way that they attribute racist, sexist, or other unethical vices to the machines and not to their creators. In reality, however, many of these AIs are just powerful pattern finders and amplifiers. That's what they're built to do. Sniff out patterns, find them, show them to us, blow them up, magnify them. And the patterns that they find and amplify, including the racist and sexist patterns, are already there in our social data. So who's to blame for that? So here's a question for you. If you look in a mirror and you see a dirty face looking back at you, what should you do? Break the mirror? Bad mirror. I didn't want to see that. Start an anti-mirror campaign? Clearly mirrors are dangerous. Clearly we have to get rid of the mirrors because they're showing us all this ugly stuff we don't want to see. Should we start scrubbing the mirror? Let's make sure we get the dirt off that mirror, right? That might not be the best or wisest or most direct solution. Should we accept what the mirror shows as inevitable? Oh, I guess we got to have dirty faces. It's in the mirror, what can we do? Or maybe should we try washing some dirt off of our face, right? And I hope you guys see the comparison here. A lot of the rhetoric around AI and some of the racist and sexist and other damaging tendencies that it may have in our society are really reflections of ourselves. And the important thing is that we use that mirror to diagnose and modify our own institutions, make our world more just, so that what AI reflects back to us can be just as well. So if we do it right, I think that life with AI can be more humane than life without it. But the future of human-AI partnership, one that serves and enriches human lives, isn't something that's going to happen organically. We can't just sit back and expect that to be the future that's delivered to us. It'll need to be a choice that we make to improve our machines by improving ourselves. So remember what I said about AI being an accelerator. Okay, well, what is it accelerating right now? Where are we right now? Right now, we're running downhill on an unstable and windy gravel road with a lot of potholes and cliffs. Those include rising economic and political inequality, unchecked resource consumption and degradation, irresponsible uses of power, short-term social and economic incentives, pollution of the physical and informational environment. So what is AI going to do? If we do nothing, what it will do is accelerate our speed along this path toward those potholes and cliffs. So what do? We can either resign ourselves to a wreck, or we can commit now to building a safer and better road to travel. That won't be easy to do. It'll take a lot of resources. It'll take a lot of intelligence. It'll take a lot of commitment. But what's the alternative? Just giving up and running our species off a cliff instead? So the critical choice we face, I think, is both our greatest danger and our greatest opportunity. Can humans rise to this responsibility? Yes, they can. Will we? That's up to us. That's our decision to make. So here's some lessons from the AI mirror I want to conclude with. The AI mirror is a powerful diagnostic tool for humans who want to construct better societies and a better world. And in a community like Santa Clara University, this is our mission. And AI is a way that we can leverage that potential. But to do that, AI must not be used as a scapegoat for human moral failures, even those that it reflects, magnifies, and perpetuates. We are still the responsible agents. This is good news. So to get to this future, the positive future, we need investment today in human enrichment and ethical oversight of AI. I like to say AI is not ready for solo flight. And we still need to be the pilots. We still need to be calling the shots. Despite its profound risks, though, AI can be a powerful tool for good and a driver of human growth. And trying to make it better can be a powerful incentive to make ourselves better, to make our society better. So what kind of future can we expect from AI? That's the question I posed at the beginning of these remarks. That's still very much up to us. It's always going to be us in the AI mirror. And it's still up to us whether we'll like what we see. Thank you.
Very compelling. AI as a prosthetic, as an accelerant, and as a mirror. Thank you, Shannon. So if that caught your interest, be sure to check out Dr. Vallor's book, Technology and the Virtues, A Philosophical Guide to a Future Worth Wanting. We'll be sending out some more information on where you can purchase the book and a follow-up email after this event. It is now my pleasure to introduce our final speaker for the evening, Mr. Michael Malone. Mr. Malone is an author, journalist, television host, and a member of the faculty of SU's Department of English. After earning 2 degrees from Santa Clara University, he joined the San Jose Mercury News as the world's first daily high-tech reporter. There he was nominated twice for the Pulitzer Prize in investigating reporting, and he has been a columnist for the New York Times, ABC News, and at Forbes. At Forbes, he was the editor-in-chief of the nation's largest circulation high-tech business magazine, Forbes ASAP. Mr. Malone is the author or co-author of nearly 20 books. Books on history and business and biography, including several bestsellers. He is the host of 4 PBS interview series. He was co-producer and writer for the Emmy-nominated PBS primetime miniseries, The New Heroes. And he is a founding shareholder of several successful Silicon Valley startups, including eBay. Malone was among the first to receive SCU's Leaders Legacy Award in 2010 for creating the Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford program. It's now the largest event for entrepreneurs in all of Europe. Malone was named a Distinguished Friend of Oxford and Associate Fellow at Said Business School. He is a regular op-ed contributor to the Wall Street Journal, and he has 3 books slated for publication in the next year. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Michael Malone.
All right.
My stopwatch.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. It's an honor to be among so many distinguished Broncos. My affiliation with Santa Clara University began 50 years ago, as a matter of fact. I was working on my Boy Scout Eagle project, mapping all the various old missions of Santa Clara. So the next time you depend upon the official Santa Clara map Just keep in mind, it was originally designed by a 13-year-old Presbyterian boy from Sunnyvale. Now, what I propose to do tonight is give 3 speeches, all in 15 minutes. So I need some help. I need somebody to watch down here. Anybody got a watch? You do. Okay. Every 5 minutes, I want you to go like that, and I'll switch speeches. Okay? Now, let's begin with a poll, because I want to characterize who we are. So let's go back through the decades of Santa Clara history and what years you graduated. So anybody here from the teens? Oh, I saw some young people. Okay. How about from the aughts? There we go. 90s? 80s? 70s? There we go. There's the sweet spot. There's the lump in the snake. Did I say 60s yet? 60s. 50s. Those will all be males raising their hand. 40s. 40s, all right. When we still played football. Okay, 3 speeches. Number 1, let's call this change, or what's coming. I don't have to tell you that being here in Silicon Valley, we've seen a lot of changes. I've lived here long enough that I literally hunted ground squirrels on the farm right here. A lot's about to happen. In fact, everything that's come up till now is just a prelude to the explosion of change that we're going to undergo in the next few years. There are several factors in that. One of them is Moore's Law keeps going, and it doesn't show any sign of slowing down, or slowing down just a little bit, but will probably be underneath the regime of Moore's Law, the doubling of power of semiconductor devices and ultimately all electronic devices every few years. By all indications, that will go on till at least 2050. And keep in mind, in 2007, that curve went almost vertical. So the amount of change that we're experiencing every year now is about equal to 30 years of technology history if you went back into the 60s or 70s. So it's astounding what's happening to us right now. A second thing is occurring too, which you may have noticed. You may have noticed driving up here. See all those cranes over there? Yeah, well, there's a long curve in Silicon Valley history, and those of you who graduated in the 70s and 60s and all that have actually seen it. Most people in Silicon Valley are so new, they don't know it exists. And that's a long curve that swings between hardware and software. And for the last almost 20 years, we've been defined by the software world. It's a world of applications, code, all the things that run our devices. That world has dominated the technology industry. That world is composed mainly of code writers. They're young, they're single, they like to live in urban areas. And so San Francisco has really been the center of gravity of the technology revolution since about 1995. Before that, it was down here. Well, the pendulum has begun to swing back rapidly and back to hardware. And the center of gravity of Silicon Valley is now moving down here. In fact, I've even written, you can make a pretty good argument if you drew a compass in a 5-mile or 10-mile diameter, the new center of Silicon Valley is literally right here. It's in the triangle between 85, 101, and 237. From here, you can almost look in every direction and see a major company, from Intel to the Apple Death Star to Tesla to Google to Facebook to LinkedIn in downtown Sunnyvale. This is where it's all beginning to happen again. And this world, this era, is usually defined by older people, engineers, married. They prefer suburban life because they can put their kids into school. And that's going to change the complexion of Silicon Valley radically. The world of the slightly spectrum code writers riding the buses to San Francisco is actually approaching an end. And the boom you're seeing around you right now in real estate and other development is going to accelerate down here in the South Valley. It's going to spill over the hills into Tracy and head further south all the way over 152 probably. So the valley's growth is just beginning. If it seems crazy now, just wait. The third cycle is, of course, the 4-year boom-bust cycle. And we're about, can't you sense it? Things are about to slow down. We just can't keep doing this. I mean, I was stuck in gridlock the other day at 11 o'clock in the morning on 280. Now, I'm sorry, this is not livable. The houses in my neighborhood, because we're bicycle and electric car distance from the Death Star, the prices have doubled in the last year. That's nice, but for those of us with a mortgage, but for anybody who wants to move here, it's impossible. That usually signals a downturn. And I suspect that by this summer or next fall, the valley will go through a bust. Not as bad as 2000 or one of those, 2008, but a bust. And that's actually a salutary thing, because good times benefit big companies. Bad times benefit entrepreneurs. If you're going to start a company, downturns are the best time. Why? Because you got lots of free time because you've been laid off. But there's also a lot of talent. There's also a lot of talent floating around that you can pick up, that you can't pick up during boom times. They're working. Now they're laid off too. The big companies are distracted, dealing with their problems, and the VCs are awash with money, and they start moving up the food chain to earlier rounds. So if you're planning on starting a company, now's a good time. So, okay. Clock's ticking, 5 minutes. So, what does all this mean? What are we going to see in the near future? Well, we just heard too from Dr. Vallor, AI and robotics. Let me add to that list now with other things that are coming. Autonomous vehicles, drones, mobile medical devices. I don't know if you guys realize, probably because it's not taking place in the United States yet because of FDA problems, but around the world, especially in places like India, there is a mobile medical revolution going on where more and more devices are going to be used to track your body's processes and tell it to your phone. And your phone's going to tell to all your stakeholders, your family, your doctor, the hospital, your insurance company, your employer. It's going to measure everything. And increasingly, those devices are not going to be outside your body that do the measuring, but inside. That revolution, when it hits here, is going to be astounding. There'll be so many products being introduced, it'll happen so fast that literally our heads will spin. Transformed homes, you saw the tiny home designs, but it's going to be much more than that. Often unremarked is the fact that technological revolutions many times have their biggest effect on the construction trades. Look at a house from 1920 with the garage in the alley out back, the house in the 1950s with a big picture window with the garage for the car right there in the front of the house. Now the modern turned inwards castle where we have our home office. We don't know what comes next, but it's going to come. It's inevitable. New types of retailing. Amazon's opening stores all over the place where you go in and you shop, but you don't fill a shopping cart. You just hold the item up and it records it, and then they load up your car for you with those items. Retailing is going through a massive transformation right now, and the battle between Amazon and Walmart is going to be fun. I mean, we're going to all benefit from that one. And then the big things, like the Internet of Things. You guys know what the Internet of Things is, right? That's when your devices talk to each other and to your computer and your phone, and you're not in the conversation. They're just sort of watching out for you. You know, they start your car in the morning and they open the garage door and they've already figured out your best route to the meeting you're going to, and they've reserved a parking place when you get there. All of this is going on around you. And they suspect this is going to be 10 times bigger than the internet we know. And what's going to drive that? New types of computation, especially quantum computing. If you know anything about what's emerging in quantum computing, you're looking at computers that are hundreds of thousands of times faster than the fastest ones we know now. It's going to take a while to emerge, but And there's a thing called Malone's Law. And Malone's Law says that any new technological revolution arrives slower than we predict, but faster than we're prepared for. And when that kind of quantum computing and Internet of Things arrive, it's going to create social dislocation for all of us, and we'll be coping rather rapidly. We had 5 minutes yet? 1 minute. I'll go to speech two, because I borrow a little time at the front. Okay, so all these changes, what does that mean? Well, we're kind of used to change here in the Valley, right? But this is not an evolution. This is a revolution. We are literally undergoing a historic phase change. We think of phase change as a term from science. Think of water, ice, and steam. Now, the rules that govern water are one thing, it's hydraulics. The rules that govern ice, even though it's the same thing, the rules that govern ice are different. They're solid-state physics, okay? And the same it goes on with steam. A phase change is a fundamental shift in what exists in such a way that everything about it is different. The rules change, life changes, our interactions with the changes. The scientific revolution has now reached the point, the digital revolution has now reached the point that we are on the brink of a phase change. It's begun. In fact, venture capitalist Bill Davidow and I are in the midst of working on a large book, our first one since Virtual Corporation, on just this subject. There are small phase changes and big ones. Small ones are, look at your kitchen. Okay, you go in your kitchen, it kind of looks the same, right, as it did when you were a kid. There's a refrigerator, there's a stove, there's a sink, dishwasher. But think of how differently we use that kitchen. Nobody cooks in there anymore. You put it in the microwave. Your refrigerator is now going to contact the internet and order food for you, to fill it back up. We don't eat at a table much anymore. It's just sort of like a drive-through. So we have the same kitchen, but we're using it differently. The rules have changed. That's a small phase change. Another one, another small change was the stirrup. The invention of the stirrup 2,000 years ago suddenly made mounted warfare possible. That changed the nature of the world, of nations and monarchies and everything else, because now you could ride in a battle holding a lance and stand up. Seems small, but it changed a lot of things. Every once in a while, we get an epical phase change. We've only had two in recorded human history. We had the agricultural revolution, and we had the industrial revolution. Now, to give you an idea of the magnitude of these things, the Renaissance isn't an epical phase change. It didn't really affect that many people. The Industrial Revolution really did, and so did the Agricultural Revolution. Agricultural Revolution, one day you're driving goats across the countryside, you're migrating continuously. Next thing you know, you're living in Jericho, and you're pounding wheat into bread and making beer, and you have a town, and you have a government, and you have all those things. Industrial Revolution, 20 generations of your family has worked on a farm. All of a sudden, you leave the farm, move to the city, work at a factory, go to public school. All of those things have occurred in just a matter of a couple lifetimes. So we are now heading into a third such phase change. And this one is the autonomous revolution. And just like the two before it, everything changes. All the rules change. I say autonomous because we are creating things that are beginning to think for themselves. Not sophisticated thinking, but are capable of autonomy. And as we do that, we multiply our power. We multiply our reach, but we also surrender a lot of our liberty. And in that dialectic, we really don't know what's going to emerge from that. What we know from past phase changes, epical phase changes, is we don't really remember what it was like before they happened. If you came from a generation of hunter-gatherers, and suddenly you're in a city, you don't really remember what life was like that much. We have a few beforehand. We have a little bit of memory. We can read Gilgamesh, but even that's kind of after the agricultural revolution. We don't really know what it was like to be a caveman. Same thing with the Industrial Revolution. We have a few books that were written before and memories and paintings and all that, but how did people think before the Industrial Revolution? We really don't know, because the rules have changed so fundamentally. It creates sort of a collective amnesia. Well, the world we're living in right now is going to be pretty much forgotten over the next 25 years as we enter into this new thing. And think about your own lives up till now. Do you remember what it was like to live before the internet, before cellular phones? Your children don't. They have no idea. They can read about it, but that's forgotten. New rules are going to be emerging. And at the moment, we have no idea what they are. And so, okay, done. But the bottom line is we have to learn these new rules, and we have to learn them fast. Why? Because the history of these revolutions is, until we learn the new rules, we go through a period of difficulty and strife and warfare and bloodshed and all sorts of terrible things until we catch on how the new game is played. So our task is to find those new rules as quickly as possible. We can't predict them. Looking at a bowl of water, you can't predict what it's going to be like when that turns into ice, what that means. You have no idea what shape. We don't know that. One of the few things that is unique in chemistry is water, when it turns into ice, gets bigger. That's why ice floats. That's why the earth hasn't frozen, because we keep water on the bottom of our lakes, on the bottom of the ocean. We don't know that until we see it. We can't predict it. So that brings us to Santa Clara University. The major task of this university in the years to come is to help find those rules and to apply to those new rules the morality and the faith that we'll need to learn how to live with them. And Santa Clara has already begun that process. We see that with the new Sobrato science operations. We see it with the STEM program. We see it with the expansion of the university, the application of new technologies. You saw an article I wrote a while back about Santa Clara's role in the history of Silicon Valley. Well, if you look at the university today, Santa Clara's always played a crucial role, but it's becoming more important to this valley every day, and especially with this change. Santa Clara is back at the epicenter of Silicon Valley. And if you look around the school, we have the Ethics Center that's looking at the ethics and morality of AI and other technological innovations. We have the law school. It's always been a leader in the development of patent law. Now it's being challenged by the question of who owns intelligence, who owns the result of a CRISPR genome test, who owns all of these things, and internationally too, as we work in a global marketplace. So Santa Clara is cutting the path in that. In the engineering school, we're finding new platforms. That's what the hardware revolution is all about, this swinging back to hardware. It's because we've created so many applications that we just run out of new ideas. We have to come up with new platforms, new hardware that we can design software for. Well, that's being done not amongst code writers, it's being done in the engineering schools. And Santa Clara has always led the way in the creation of new platforms. The business school, not only is it training a new generation of leaders to work in these new rules, but it's also uncovering new models of global commerce, and it's training a new generation of entrepreneurs to find opportunities in this phase change and to compete in the future. So Santa Clara University has already begun its own phase change, and one that will, with luck, combine the rules of the autonomous revolution with the unique values taught by a Jesuit institution. It's a great quest for this university and a needed one. And as a result, Santa Clara seems destined to play a vital role in the new world to come. And I can say with certainty at this point, from everything I've learned, that Santa Clara's greatest destiny still lies in its future. And if you look around at each other, I hope you can be part of that future. History will record that you were the people who represented Santa Clara University during Silicon Valley's golden age. Thank you. Good. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mike. And his emphasis on making sure that that's what we do. We educate leaders with a conscience who are competent and make compassionate decisions for that next phase. And it's this next phase of development at Santa Clara that's going to elevate the university to become among the most distinctive institutions of higher education in the country and in the world. Our vision will place us in a leadership role at the intersection of technology and entrepreneurship, of arts and humanities, and Jesuit values in Silicon Valley, and that's really important. So we invite you to be a part of the dialogue and a part of an exciting period in this history of the university. So you're going to be receiving an email in the next few days outlining ways that you can get involved. We want you to participate, and we need you to participate to help us to get to where we want to go. For those of you who wish, I invite you to remain seated, and you'll be able to participate in a Q&A with Dr. Shannon Vallor, Michael Malone, and it's going to be facilitated by Saum. The cards that are in your seats, you can use those to actually fill out a question that you might have for them. And me personally, I hear these people talk, I feel like I deserve course credit. I learned so much. So if you have a question, and don't ask a question, is this going to be on the exam? But if you have another question you want to write down, and we'll be picking those cards up to be able to ask those questions. The other thing that's important about the cards is these two people, Mike, who's written so many books, and Dr. Vallor, who has her new book out, would like to share a few of those with a few of you. Mike's book, The Intel Trilogy, and Shannon's book, which is Technology. I make a living with my mouth. Technology and Virtues, a philosophical guide to a future worth wanting, is marked on a card underneath some of your seats. A few of you, if you reach under your seat, you may be the lucky one who has one of those cards, and if you get those cards up to us, we'll give you the book, and then you'll be able to get the book signed from Mike and Shannon. So you can start filling out your card now. If you'd like to already start and head to the reception right now, you can do that. If you want to be here for the Q&A, hang in and write your card out, and we'll be with you shortly while we set up. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. All right. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Mike, for a couple of fascinating talks, things that are exciting, that are illuminating, but we also got some cautionary tales. And I would actually like to begin with asking you both about a couple things to be concerned about. You know, Shannon, you ran through a whole list of potential pitfalls with AI. One of the ones that wasn't on there, but I know you've done some thinking and writing about, is moral de-skilling. And I'm wondering if we can start with talking about that and concerns about AI and the potential for moral de-skilling.
Sure. Well, I think, you know, Mike spoke about the way that the future is really one that is being designed to relieve us of a lot of the decisions in our daily lives that we make for ourselves, a lot of the problems that historically humans have had to solve. Everything as trivial from what to eat for breakfast to, you know, how to respond to a difficult social challenge, or help our child who's struggling with a problem at school. And it won't be very long before we're being encouraged to rely on very specific forms of machine intelligence, either to advise us in those decisions or quite frequently to make those decisions for us. And the promise, of course, is that that frees us up, right? That liberates us, that allows us to spend our time and energy on other things. But it's important to recognize that humans develop moral intelligence, practical intelligence, emotional intelligence, problem-solving abilities by confronting difficult problems and challenges and being forced to find solutions for ourselves. So one of the dangers that I've written about is the danger that, especially when we have tools that solve morally loaded problems for us, whether it's figuring out whether to give bail to a criminal defendant, or what sort of sentence to give that person, or whether to give someone a loan to start a new business, or whether to offer someone a certain sort of support who's struggling with some mental health issues. These sorts of things are increasingly being offered by automated systems. And it's very tempting, even if the human is nominally responsible for the decision, it's very tempting for the human to offload the cognitive and moral labor of solving those problems onto the machine, especially if we think the machines are more objective, less prone to error. And often we find that humans are eager to rid themselves of the burdens of especially challenging moral problems. But my great fear is that humans are going to need more moral strength and intelligence and wisdom to deal with the future that Mike described than we have today, not less, which means we're going to need more practice in challenging the most complex moral problems our society presents. And the more of that labor that we offload to machines, perhaps the more we will endanger the future that we need.
Mike, what is it that sets off alarm bells for you?
Oh, well, on a lot of this future stuff, you find yourself ambivalent. On the one hand, you were talking about moral reasoning and moral judgment. On the positive side, I'd like to think, well, we'll have more free time, we'll be able to think higher thoughts. You know, our machines will help us rehearse answers to things and see what what might come out of them. It might challenge us, it might give us options we couldn't imagine before. That's when the angel's on this shoulder. The devil over here says, do we really want to have rule by algorithm? I think objectivity gets a little bit overemphasized. There's a lot to be said for things that computers don't have, like mercy. And I worry that we will lose those abilities. We will lose those strengths and allow our machines to take over responsibility for things that we should be carrying.
So one of the members of the audience here wants to know, are we fooling ourselves that we're actually preparing the current and future generations to lead humanely in this brave new world?
Well, I think there's a real risk of that, and I speak about that quite often to business and industry leaders who say that actually the students that they're getting don't always have the skills that they really need in order to manage these new technical challenges. A lot of times they have the technical knowledge, the high-level scientific and mathematical training, but often what they're missing are the sort of broader range of skills that a liberal arts education brings to the table, the ability to communicate, the ability to work through conflicting values and priorities, the ability to negotiate among different stakeholders with very different interests. And that has to be done in almost every job, even in technical jobs. You're on a team, you need to figure out how to solve this problem together. And fewer problems are going to be of the sort that one person is empowered to solve as an individual. So I think in some sense, if we focus on, for example, developing STEM capacities in students without wrapping them in that envelope that a liberal arts education provides, then we won't be serving our students for the future. In fact, a lot of the sort of just strict computation, coding, a lot of that stuff's already becoming automated, right? Tomorrow's computers will program themselves. They'll write their own code. You'll need a human to evaluate that code and see what it's going to do in the world and know what that means. That's the skill you're going to need from people with coding expertise.
Well, Mike, one of the cover stories that you did for our magazine is why Silicon Valley loves the humanities, and also have written for the Wall Street Journal about that. Maybe you can kind of pick up on that.
Oh, I'll give you a real good reason for liberal arts education in 2018. I just wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal, I think comes out on the 10th. Talked to two gentlemen. One of them is a legendary Silicon Valley figure. Another one is the CEO of a $2 billion software company. And they both, interestingly, said the same thing, and that is that people's careers actually have two phases. There's the first phase where you take your college education and your technical skills and you apply them, and you get better at what you do, and you get a better reputation, and you move up through the ranks of the technical side of your company. But at about the 15-year mark, you suddenly hit a ceiling. No matter how good you are, you're becoming a bit obsolete. You're not quite on the technological edge. You're not really adding an equal amount of productivity to your career by the year. At that point, you have to transition. And you transition into your secondary skills, which are your people skills, your ability to lead, your ability to run teams, your ability to motivate people, all those things that we think of as management skills. And if you can't make that transition, or if you're not prepared because you didn't get trained to make that transition, then no matter how good you are, your career is just going to plateau. The only way to fully realize all of your dreams and capabilities is if you have those secondary skills and you bring them to the fore. Having a career in programming is, it's nice to have a degree in it. You're going to get a running start, but at a certain point, you better have some humanities. You better have some liberal arts education to prepare you for that second half of your life.
So one of the audience members here wants to know, do you believe consumers will one day own and be paid for their data profile?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to say something that's probably heretical, but I really think that information has to have a value. I think it has to be monetized. I think every time you do a Google search, you're going to have to be charged. It may be a quarter of a penny, but if we don't bring monetization to the web, then we get the opposite side problem, which is information becomes free, including your information. And a company right across the street over here takes all of your personal information and they sell it to advertisers and everything else, and they're not paying you a dime. So until we attach money to the internet, this kind of lack of privacy is just going to accelerate.
Well, I think, this is the risk, is that it already, in some sense, it is monetized. It's just that the transactions aren't benefiting the people who are generating the value, right? Or at least not in the way that we think. And it's going to be very difficult to make that transition, right? If you've already given away these things for free, it becomes very difficult to negotiate a return to your ownership of this stuff. So I agree with Mike that at some point that transition is going to need to happen, but it's going to be a very, very difficult one, and consumers are going to have to fight for it.
So with the transition to increasing use of AI and automation, one of the audience members wants to know, what about whole classes of jobs that are going to be destroyed, truckers, factory workers, physicians' assistants, et cetera? What's the ethical response to that?
Well, there's an ethical response, I think, that needs to come from government and policymakers. There's an ethical response that needs to come from industry, and then there's an ethical response that needs to come from citizens and voters who decide how to prepare for that sort of transition. There's no realistic scenario where large categories of jobs don't disappear. I think very few things are inevitable, and I usually resist the language of inevitability because a lot of times we take the easy road by imagining that something's inevitable rather than figuring out a better way to do something. But I think the impact on the labor market is going to be severe, and there's no real way around that. The question is, when do we start preparing for it? How wisely do we prepare for it? And whose interests are taken into account? And that's where the ethics comes in, right? Because right now we don't have a political system or an economic system that is taking into account all of the interests that are morally legitimate, all of the people who have dignity, who need purpose in life, who need a sense of hope, a sense of basic security, and we're denying large classes of people access to those kinds of goods. So I think this is a reckoning that's coming. In some ways, I think it could be a good thing, I think, as I highlighted in my talk, right? We're going to get forced to a point where we recognize that our current track is unsustainable. And I hope that at that point, we commit to making some fundamental changes in the values of our society and the way they're embedded in the political and economic order. But as Mike said, there are going to be some real growing pains involved in that transition.
Well, and it sounds like we're getting into the territory of social dislocation, like you've talked
Yeah, you know, up until now, there's been kind of a class element to this that we didn't really worry about automation that much, as long as it was guys digging ditches and welding quarter panels on F-150 pickups. Now, all of a sudden, radiologists are out of work, doctors, dentists, lawyers. You know, more and more the professions are starting to get displaced. And my awful feeling is that, you know, we could have a permanent unemployed class of people, 30%, 40%. I wrote a piece in the Harvard Business Review and I called them ZEVs, which is zero economic value people, which is they can't contribute no matter how much education they have, no matter what skills they have. There's no way they can actually contribute to the economy anymore because whatever they do, computers are doing better or robots are doing better. So what happens to these people? Well, there's talk of guaranteed annual income, but that strikes me as deeply soul-hollowing. I mean, if you're sitting around playing World of Warcraft on your wall-sized TV in your apartment and you have no disposable income except you're checked once a month, it seems to me that it kind of removes any kind of agency to your life, any kind of value. So what do we do with these people? We have to find them something to do. And maybe that's nonprofit work that's paid in some kind of way. There's a solution out there, and I trust humanity to find that solution, but we're not there yet. And that could be the biggest social problem of the second half of this century.
Let me just add to that I think this is an opportunity also to revisit what sort of work we think is worthwhile and what sort of compensation it deserves. Right now, the caring professions, for example, are some of the least well-paid professions in our society. What is the last thing that machines are going to get good at? Taking care of us in all of the ways that really matter. So maybe we can start thinking about the real value of care in our society and actually compensating people for cultivating the skill of care, whether it's mental health care, whether it's the kind of care that we give in the educational system, right? Kindergarten teachers right now, considering the importance of what they do and then looking at what they get paid, that's just a straight up travesty. And AI might liberate us from the need to direct our best and brightest into professions that are primarily about making stuff that can be sold. Machines will be doing all the making stuff that can be sold. We can redirect human intelligence, wisdom, and talent into the sorts of things that machines can't do for us and that we really haven't been doing very well because of our emphasis on economic productivity in a sort of consumption model of society.
Yeah, Mike.
I think a good sign is that the notion of a job is beginning to fade away, a full-time job, and we're moving increasingly towards, the gig economy. We still haven't quite figured out the whole micro-payment system where you get hired to, come up with a sentence for a headline and you're paid $50 and it automatically goes into your bank account and the government, keeps track of that stuff and all that. We haven't purified that process and made it really efficient. But as we do, I think it'll give us some options in this new economy that we don't have now.
So we'll take time for just two more questions because I want to make sure you folks have time for the reception as well and a chance to talk with Mike and Shannon individually. Someone here wants to know, what are your thoughts on an AI or robot tax?
Robot tax. Yeah, this has been proposed in a few communities. I actually think it's well-meaning and well-intentioned, but I don't think it's the solution. I think there are other kinds of economic changes that need to be made. But the problem with taxing the robots is you are creating a disincentive to develop the technology that can actually be used in beneficial ways. And you're penalizing the people who want to innovate. And I don't think that is the way that our society should solve this problem. But I think that there are lots of other ways that we can look at our current economic order and recognize that we need to be able to creatively envision a new kind of system that is just not a trivial change to our current one. So Mike mentioned universal basic income. I agree with Mike. I actually don't support the sort of standard version of that. I'd much rather have a system where we're giving people some meaningful work that actually improves society rather than just paying for their minimum basic needs. But I do think that one good thing about the universal basic income idea is it's a sign that people are willing to entertain some big changes to the way that we govern our society and the way that we distribute our wealth. And those kinds of changes are going to be needed in order to flourish in the next century.
So as we wrap up, yes.
I was going to say, I think in our current global marketplace, any kind of reactionary fiscal policy that punishes innovation is national suicide. If we don't do it, the rest of the world will reinforce the use of robotics to, defeat us.
So here we are, still at the beginning of 2018. So in 30 seconds or less, right? What's one prediction that you have that most people don't have on their radar yet? Something that we're going to see connected with AI, with the Valley. What's one surprise that you see on the horizon?
Oh, I'll make mine very pedestrian. By the end of the year, 15% drop in the value of your house.
All right.
It's a bubble. It's going to deflate. But if the history of the Bay Area is, every time you have a downturn, it goes down 15%. Then it takes off again after that and goes up 50%. So just hang on. You'll be fine.
I think one thing that we haven't really confronted, especially as so much emphasis has been on the impact of autonomous vehicles on the labor market, I don't think we've confronted what's going to happen to retail. You already see Amazon developing its new store. If you've heard about this, right, there's no one in the store. There's just stuff. You walk in, and computers analyze your entry, what you've taken, charge you for it on your way out, and no person ever interacts with you. For retailers, and retailers are already struggling in a lot of different industries, for retailers it's going to become increasingly challenging to defend having people in that retail setting. And think about how many people in this country survive and put food on their kids' plates and keep a roof over their heads by doing retail work. People who've never been able to reach the level where they can get a college education, where they don't live in the kind of urban centers where there are a lot of other opportunities for work. This is a real labor crisis that's coming in retail, and we need to be thinking about it.
I think Google and Amazon and LinkedIn and especially Twitter are going to regret getting involved in politics. I think we're going to see increasing calls. They're so big. They're some of the biggest enterprises in human history. We're going to see growing calls to break them up.
All right. Well, please join me in thanking Mike Malone and Shannon Vallor. And thank you to all of you for being here this evening. For those of you who are on social media, right, and want to share this evening, there is a hashtag that we've created. We also brought with us up to Mountain View. We brought a little bit of Mission Santa Clara over there in the reception, right? So you can pose in front of the mission, even right here in Mountain View. So we look forward to chatting with you over there. We look forward to connecting with you through the magazine and online. And thank you for your support and for making Santa Clara the incredible place that it is.